Keep it high, keep it tight. I'm Jay Mercer, review guy, back to bring you another review. This one's going to be a longer one because I am reviewing an entire season of a series, this being Into the Badlands. So the way this is going to go is the first half is going to be completely non-spoiler, and it will be a synopsis of the show for people that are maybe curious about whether or not they should get into it. Maybe you've seen it on Netflix, maybe you have seen it on television with the commercials that are being played for it. Whatever it may be, the first half is going to be a non-spoiler synopsis of the series and if you should watch it. The second half of this is going to be a strict review of the 6 episodes of the first season, and that will contain spoilers. That will be intended for people to either come back to after they've seen the series or people that have already seen the series. So you're safe if you haven't seen it for right now. I will tell you when I'm going to get into spoilers. So what is Into the Badlands? Into the Badlands is a television series that is developed by AMC Studios, which you will definitely recognize them for creating hit shows such as The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, Breaking Bad, and a ton of other classic shows. Hell on Wheels. And basically what Into the Badlands is you might be deterred at first from commercials because I feel like they don't necessarily do the show justice. And also, you can go watch the show on Netflix. The first 2 seasons are streaming, and the 3rd season is on currently every week on AMC. So, Into the Badlands is a half martial arts, half drama, action kind of post-apocalyptic series that takes place 500 years after the world has been wiped out, or I should say, a lot of the world and its resources have been depleted and killed. 7 barons took control of the anarchy and the chaos that came of the people that were left behind in what is known as the Badlands. This is where civilization lies now, and everything beyond the Badlands is supposedly empty, dead, desolate. So the 7 men and women took up the title of Baron to take control of the chaos and form a class system. If you are familiar with Marxism, it's a lot like that, the proletariats and the bourgeoisie, how there's a class struggle, how there is a hierarchy, how there is a kind of oligarchy going on, and it's very, very kind of mind-gamey. It's kind of everyone has a job, you get your rewards based on your job, you move up in the ranks if you choose, if you get rewarded. It's stuff like that. If you know anything about like socialism / Marxism or Leninism, whatever you want to call it, that's basically what the political struggle and the political system of this series is. So the 7 barons rule different places, and below them are 4 ranks. There is the, obviously, well, not counting, there's like the baroness, which would be considered like the vice president, I mean not the vice president, the first lady of the baron, or first man. It's basically like the one below, that's the wife or husband. Then there is what's known as the regent, which is the clipper, which I'll get to in a minute, which is straight below the baron and is kind of their sworn protector, their sworn advisor. And then there's what's known as the clippers, which are the specially trained people that work for the baron, do the baron's dirty work, and swear their unending loyalty to the baron. And then there is what's known as the colts, which are the apprentices that the clippers choose to take on. These are usually young boys that are being trained to become clippers in the future. They are trained directly under the clipper that chooses to take them under their wing. And then finally, there is what's known as the cogs, which are the workers, what you'd consider the peasants, what would be considered kind of the proletariats in a way, but they would be more like the kind of lower class plebeians type of people. And everyone has a job. The cogs usually work out in the poppy fields. So what does this series, what is it about? Well, basically it centers around a character by the name of Sunny. Now, it is an ensemble cast. It's kind of like Game of Thrones. There is a lot of different characters in different areas, and you don't necessarily just focus on one, especially as it gets into the heat of the season. But I will go over some of the primary characters and how I feel about them or what I expect. We're still not getting into spoilers here. So the main character, quote unquote main character, is by the name of Sunny. and he's kind of semi-based on Sun Wukong from Journey to the West, but not really. The whole story's loosely based on Journey to the West, and if you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But Sunny is the Clipper slash Regent below the Baron known as Quinn. Quinn is played amazingly by, I believe his name is Martin Kazakis, I believe his name is. He does a phenomenal job, and Sunny is the Regent of Quinn, and the Barons are kind of getting a little fed up with Quinn, and all the Barons are kind of, there's a lot of corruption going on within the ranks of each Baron's people, and it's not so much a revolution as there's certain Barons that are wanting to take over, and Quinn is kind of the series doesn't really have a villain. The series doesn't have a long-running antagonist, and it's very interesting to see how Quinn and these other Barons interact. We haven't seen all of them. We have seen, how many of them have we seen? We've seen three, I believe. I think we've seen three, and in season 1. But so Quinn is this kind of ruthless. He's, like I said, the actor does a phenomenal job of being just a very sleazy type of character. If you've watched Walking Dead and you know the character of Gregory, kind of like him, but even more just kind of, it's hard to explain. He's hateable, but at the same time, the actor makes you like him just because of how good of a job he does. And Sunny questions his loyalties within his own system due to things that he's made to do. Kind of reminded me of Final Fantasy IV with Cecil and the King. No one knows what I'm talking about there, but whatever. I think that Sunny's actor, I believe his name is Daniel Wu. He also is one of the co-executive producers of the television series. He does an amazing job. And there is so much I could say about that character alone, because I'll get into more of his character in the spoiler part, but it really is, he's a great character. Sometimes I don't like the protagonist. I really love the protagonist. The next character that I'm going to talk about is the Widow. So the Widow is played by Emily Beecham. Is that it? Emily Beckham? Emily Beecham, I think it is. And basically, she is another one of the Barons. She is a complete and total badass, and she is an absolutely amazing, strong female character without it feeling forced. She leads what's known as the Butterflies, which are a group of girls that are her clippers, and she considers them all her daughters, including another character, Tilda, which I'll get into in a minute. But the Widow is basically wanting to reshape the world because she feels like the Barons aren't really fit for it. She feels like she should be the one to... She's not an antagonist, but all the Barons are kind of hateable just for the fact that they kind of do have this slave type of system with the cogs and the hierarchy, the oligarchy, whatever you want to call it. But the Widow was honestly one of my favorite characters because I think her name is like Minerva. Minerva, I think that's her name, but she's just called the Widow. They name drop her name a couple times, but her name's the Widow. And she's kind of the main Baron that Quinn wants to rid the world of. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic how Quinn wants to kill the Widow and the Widow wants to kill Quinn, and all the Barons are kind of surrounding, and it's people picking sides. And the Widow is, the actress that plays the Widow, Emily Beecham, is very, very great at what she does because she makes you hate her, but at the same time she makes you feel sympathy for her. She makes you feel a bit of kind of, you understand the position, and it's hard for me to pick in this season which Baron I was necessarily rooting for the most, because I feel like the Widow was probably the most logical out of all of the Barons, and I feel like she was probably the kindest, but at the same time, all of the Barons in the series, without going into the spoilers, do bad things, and that's where kind of the fine line's drawn, because a lot of these characters are in the gray area. Some lean more towards the white side, some leans more towards the black side, and I would say the Widow and Quinn both lean more towards the black side, but the Widow was definitely one of the highlights of the series for me, because I really, really think that not only was the actress very good at selling you on the character, selling you on the dialogue, and making her really feel like a living, breathing character in this environment, but I also think that she was a very, very good way to flesh out this series with a lot of characters, because she opened the door to a side of the story that was really good. And if we would have had the interesting side, which was Quinn's side, and then had a boring side, it would have been easy to pick your side. But I think that the Widow really does add a lot to the series, and I definitely enjoyed seeing her as Emily Beecham as the Widow. So before we go further with the characters, let me just say, the action is the best part of the series by far. The choreography is done fantastic. I'm not 100% sure. I saw the name. It was an Asian name, but I think it's two people that do the action choreography camera work and the choreography training. And obviously Daniel Wu is a martial artist, and he's been in a lot of Chinese films. He is a very renowned martial artist in certain movies and kung fu and stuff like that. But this is a very, very interesting series, just because if you've ever watched a kung fu movie, it can sometimes feel cheesy, it can sometimes feel overplayed, but sometimes it can be really good. But then you watch the movie and it's over. Well, this is 6 episodes where every episode you're getting amazing action, amazing choreography, especially from Daniel Wu and Emily Beecham as the Widow and Martin Kozakis as Quinn, and just pretty much every character has their time to shine except some of them when it comes to action. And the action is definitely the highlight of this series, because it really feels real. The sound effects that they use for when people are being hit, when people are flying up, it really makes it feel like a living, breathing fight. And when I was watching the series and I was watching it through, I definitely felt as if this was a good action scene. I was convinced by it. It didn't feel staged. It didn't feel like there were just two actors throwing fake punches at each other. It really, really felt like, oh my gosh, one of these two are going to die. And this is one thing I got to say, is there is blood and gore in this. Not necessarily gore, but blood, definitely. They didn't skimp out on blood. If someone gets sliced in the stomach or something, you see it. And wounds are played very, very well in this series. I'll go into spoilers when I do that. But the wounds are played to a very well. It's not just like, oh, this person gets stabbed or this person gets hit and they just get up. No, they really make it seem real. So the dynamic with something you will get in the first episode is that there is some issues going on with Quinn and his family. There's a lot of family dynamic there. He is a polygamist. He wants to take multiple wives, those being two characters, Jade and Lydia. And then he has his son, Ryder, which is really just a rude person. And then you have on the widow's side, you have her daughter, Tilda, who is another big character. You meet pretty early on a character by the name of MK that's in Sunny's storyline. I'd consider him probably the detragonist. And honestly, there's just a lot of characters that weave in and out. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anyone. The only other main character would be Vale, the doctor, and pretty much all the other characters that I've mentioned that I didn't give much explanation for gets into spoilers. But this series is streaming on Netflix, and I highly suggest that if you have not checked it out, that you do now, because it is definitely worth your time, and it is definitely worth watching and giving a shot, because they weave in the drama and they weave in the action at a considerably great rate. And the first episode sets up so many questions and so many things you will be interested to see. I swear it to you. The first episode has one of the best pilots I've ever seen of a series in terms of what they do with it. So much is set up, and I'm pretty sure almost every main character is in it. Maybe not Tilda. I think she comes in episode 2. But it's fantastic. And so going from this point forward, if you have not watched the series, I suggest clicking away and coming back after you watch it, because I'm now going to get into some spoilers for Into the Badlands. And I'm going to discuss more kind of integral plot points, what I thought about certain things, and I'm going to get into those characters that I didn't give much explanation for, because I would have went into spoiler territory. So if you have not seen Into the Badlands yet, click off the video if you want to, or you can stay if you don't mind, and drop a like on the video before you do. Subscribe if you haven't, drop a comment below, and I'll shout you out. So come back once you've seen Into the Badlands. So I'll give about 5 seconds for people to click off, and then I'm going to get into the spoiler review of Into the Badlands. Alright, so whoever is still here has obviously either seen into the Badlands, or they just don't care about spoilers, or maybe whatever. So I really, really like the dynamic that they did with Sunny and Vale. Right away, you kind of find out that he's having an affair with her. He's not supposed to because he's a Clipper, and he's not supposed to. And I that whole thing was kind of, I didn't care too much about Vale, I'll be honest, but the fact that she was pregnant definitely bumped up some of that care that, because like if she has a baby in her, you don't want her to die, and you obviously care about Sunny, and you know he cares about her, but he's putting himself on the line to try to save her and the baby because he wants to keep it, and he wants to save her, and he wants to get out of the Badlands. Now, I'll tell you one thing, Vale and Sunny's relationship, I enjoyed it throughout the season. I think it was done well, and I'm curious to see where Vale goes in season 2. I'm definitely going to watch season 2, and I'll do a review of that one as well. So getting into some of the other characters, I really, really, probably my favorite relationship in the series, if you want to call it a relationship, it's kind of a bit dysfunctional, but I really did enjoy the relationship between MK and Tilda, because obviously MK has this power, and he's not as he seems. He when he's cut and when he draws blood, he turns into kind of this Super Saiyan, pretty much. He turns into just this like demon, and something takes over him. And I really like the parlay scene where Tilda's able to stop him, and he is very I wasn't a big fan of Aramis Knight's performance in it. That's the actor who plays MK. I think that sometimes he felt a little bit dry, but I definitely still enjoyed thoroughly seeing him in the series, seeing what they did with this character, and seeing how he interacted with Tilda, because I definitely like Tilda's character a lot as well. But Widow is actually probably my favorite character in the entire series. Minerva, played by Emily Beecham. Ryder is probably one of my least favorite characters, not only because you're kind of supposed to hate him, but at the same time, it's just they try so much to get you to feel sympathetic for him and feel bad for him, especially when like his mother Lydia ends up like disowning him when she's telling him that story about how she like washed his foot when it was messed up, and he's sitting there. It was after Vale did the trepidation on his head to relieve pressure because he was dying of a brain swelling, and I just didn't care about Ryder. I didn't feel sympathy for him. I didn't like him in the series, and I felt like it was very predictable what was happening. I mean, you're supposed to feel a surprise when you figure out, oh, he betrayed his father. It wasn't surprising. They were setting that up from the start. You could see it. You could see the apathy in him, and from a writer, I can see where they were coming from with that, and I see that he was needed in the series, but at the same time, he was just so boring. He was such a just one-dimensional character that has been in a lot of shows and movies and books and games before. I didn't care about him at all, man. I didn't give a damn about what happened to him. If he would have died in episode 1 or episode 6, I wouldn't have cared. He was probably my least favorite character in the entire series, if you couldn't tell. Excuse me. Moving on from there, we have these characters that kind of weave themselves in and out. A character that I was surprised to not see in the opening credits because he's in pretty much almost all of the first season is I really, really enjoyed Stephen Lang's character. I have no idea what his name was. They name dropped him a couple times, but I just cannot remember his name. But he was honestly probably my second favorite character. He stole the show every time he was on screen. And when Sunny takes MK to him and he's like, try to land a hit on this guy, Stephen Lang's character, and I will train you any way you want. I thought that was hilarious when he just whips his ass and he's in a wheelchair. But it was definitely a lot of fun to see him in the series. Overall, the action is the highlight of the series, as I said. And the parlay scene is probably my favorite action scene when they're in the graveyard and they're fighting and you see the other Baron. His name begins with an M. They only name dropped him a couple times. The black guy, the other Baron, the black man. I don't remember his name. He wasn't in it that much. I want to see more of Zephyr. Is that her name? The blonde that's on his side, the black man's side, the Baron's side. And I really liked her, and it was obvious that she had some sort of connection to Sunny, most likely some sort of intimate sexual relationship, most likely. in the past, and I would definitely like to see more of like what that was. Maybe either in a flashback or some sort of explanation, and I definitely like to see them get reunited. Will they? I don't know. She seemed like a semi-important, semi-minor character, maybe a B character, so I don't know about that. But from the first opening scene where Sunny kills all the nomads, I knew this was going to be a special series action-wise, and I have to say that the one thing that was a little bit predictable was I knew Quinn was going to die in the finale or sometime. It was obvious. He's technically already dying because he has the brain tumor, we find out. But when Sunny kills him, I was like, yes! Even though I kind of saw that coming, I didn't know who was going to kill him. I just knew someone was going to kill him. I didn't want it to be Ryder because I don't care about Ryder. I wanted it to be Sunny because it made the most sense. So I was very, very happy to see that he was killed by Sunny's blade. Yes, Sunny's blade. Go, Sunny. I really like Sunny, by the way, if you couldn't tell that. So Quinn was an awesome character. I liked him a lot in the series. He was obviously a whole heck of a lot of fun. And trying to think, is there anything else I want to touch on? I mean, there's so much I could go into with this series because it's just a great, great series. I love the environments. I think they did a great job on the environments. I hope we see more of the River King because I think he's really, really cool. He reminds me kind of Forrest Whitaker. Is that his name? Forrest Whitaker from the guy from Star Wars, the guy that played like the black man that was really sick and whatever. Forrest Whitaker, is that his name? I can't remember if that's his name. It probably isn't. But overall, I think this was a great series, and I give it a perfect 10 out of 10 for its first season. And I highly, highly suggest you check it out. I'm so excited to see what they do with season 2, and I'm definitely going to check out season 2. So I'll talk to you guys next time. This has been JMorph's Review Guy. Oh, sorry. One thing. I forgot something. Sorry. I really, probably one of my favorite scenes, just because of how disturbing it is. I like scenes that leave me traumatized because I'm a sadist, a masochist, evidently. When Quinn just takes Sunny's blade and walks in and just murders Vel's parents, the doctor and his wife. Whew, holy crap, that was an amazing scene. I just gotta say that. That left me traumatized. My jaw was on the floor and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's huge. I didn't even really care that much about the characters, but they seem nice and it's just the thought of what Quinn did. But anyways, guys, I'm JMorph's Review Guy. I'm signing off. Check this series out. You can stream it on Netflix. I'll talk to you guys next time. Keep it high, keep it tight. It's JMorph's Review Guy. Sign off saying farewell.